Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Bloom, the podcast season 2. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode. I know we haven't uploaded in a little bit, but we're hoping to get back on track, and we have a super fun episode for you guys today. If you guys are here for the very first time, I'm your host, Donovan, and I'm here with the one and only co-host,
Ashley.
And we are ecstatic to be back recording. Like I said, we have a super fun episode lined up for today. We have some fun material we're going to be going over. So yeah, we're just going to jump straight into it. But if you guys didn't check out our last episode, I think that's one that you guys probably should check out. It was a very fun one that we did about the trad community. It was a very interesting, enlightening time of looking at some of the craziness of the world. So
Yes.
If you guys didn't check that episode out, like I said, it was quite a fun one, so make sure you guys go back. The link will be in the description for that. So make sure you guys go do that. But jumping into today's episode, we don't want to waste any more of your time. I'm sure you guys all saw the title of this episode, and maybe you're confused. I know one of our first ever actual Bloom the Podcast video podcasts was on this topic about modesty. And we talked about kind of both sides. We talked about men kind of in general. We talked about women kind of in general. We didn't get into too much of the specifics, I feel like. So on this episode, we might be able to hash out a little bit more of that one side of the coin. So if you guys didn't check out our first episode to get kind of more of our general thoughts on modesty as a whole, make sure you guys go back and do that. I'm sure we'll cover a little bit of the same ground here today, but that'll be a good place to start if you guys are unfamiliar with how we feel about certain things. But yeah, jumping straight into it, men's modesty. It's a very not talked about thing. It's a very double standard, cliche, kind of scenario based topic that a lot of people wouldn't even say that it applies. I was doing some research on this topic, just trying to see what the general consensus was for men's modesty. I was watching YouTube videos, looking at articles, listening to podcasts, and the common theme that I kept hearing was that the Bible doesn't address men specifically on how they should dress. So for men's modesty, it's all about their heart and them just not basically being prideful. That was a very common theme that I saw. And we'll get to a little bit of that today. But I'll pass it over to you first. When we say men's modesty, and kind of making that delineation of we're talking about modesty, but specifically for men. Because a lot of times it's like a women's thing. So what would you say is your first thought? Like if I told you like, oh yeah, men's modesty, what are the first things that come to mind when you hear those words?
My first thing that comes to mind oftentimes is men being shirtless. I feel like that's like a huge thing.
Suns out, guns out kind of
Yeah, kind of, like that's the vibe, right? Everyone goes to the gym, they get ripped for summer, and then they go shirtless.
Summer bods. Yep.
Yeah, so I feel like that's a huge thing that I think about. I also think about like kind of like all the gym buff guys and like their accounts and the way they post things. I think about the muscle tees and the tight fitting clothes. That's kind of like what comes to my mind when I think about men's modesty. But it is really sad because I feel like if you ask someone this question, they might be completely blank and be like, I don't know. I don't really think of anything when I think of men's modesty.
Yeah.
Kind of sad.
There's a few reasons for that, and we're going to touch on those reasons today. But when I think of it, I think of, yes, the same things that you think of. But I think of, as being a guy, I think of the posture of men's activity and where it all stems from. Because I think a lot of times the reason why men's modesty is not really looked at is because no one's really honest about their intentions and their motivations for why people do certain things or dress the way that they dress or show the things that they show. So I think from an honest perspective, and obviously I can really only speak for myself, but I am fairly confident that I can speak for a large majority of men when I say that most of the things that we do, especially as single guys, is geared towards the attraction or the approval of women on the large scale.
Yeah.
So when we start talking about those things that you mentioned, getting ripped for summer, going shirtless, wearing super, super tight clothing, wearing, whatever it is.
These days, men are wearing booty shorts too. It's not just the girls. I'm sorry, I gotta throw that one out there.
Hey, it's true. Those dolphins are coming back strong, fam. But yeah, those things that you mentioned, I know why it's worn. So when we talk about this and you hear a lot of people that are like, oh, well, I don't wear it for that. I just do this for me, which is the whole modesty conversation, I feel like hinges on that little phrase, I do this for me, which is not true. So I feel like we have to come from a very honest place in this episode to actually cover any ground. On top of that, I would say a big reason why we don't associate men's modesty with clothing and things of that nature is because the society and Christian culture has conditioned women to not be honest about their attraction to men and the way that they view the male body and the things that women are attracted to.
Which is so funny, right? Because in the Christian community, right, if you ask a girl or like when you talk to girls, they're not very honest about that, right? Like they'll be like, oh, girls lusting over a guy at the beach? No way. Yeah. Like no way at all. But then how the tables turn when you go to the movies and, Chris Evans takes off his shirt and all of a sudden everyone's being honest about
clapping,
everyone's being honest about how they feel about Chris Evans taking off his shirt. Yeah. But it's like, okay, so you don't have a problem outside in your community of guys you're with, but all of a sudden you have attraction only to people on screen and they're doing the exact same thing that people around you are doing. So what's the deal there? It just shows the double standard right there. It's ridiculous.
And it's funny because it's primarily in Christian communities only. Because if you go out onto the street and you ask random non-Christian people, like, oh, what do you find attractive in a man? You will get the basic answers. You will say, oh, I like a tall guy who's fit, who has muscles and abs, and has this kind of hair, can dress well. Like they'll name the stereotypical things that we find attractive in human beings. Yeah. So it's funny to me that when we go to the Christian community and we ask that question of what do you find attractive in a man, we get this Christianese answer of, oh man, just the way he reads his Bible, it just makes me so attracted to him. Like, get out of here.
Well, you know what's crazy is I feel like I would have thought that way as well, that like the world would say it's more normal for like women to like lust or whatever. Yeah. But actually when I was, I had made a blog about this topic and Nikki was saying that he came across a girl who is not a Christian and she was just expressing her anger towards the fact that she feels like women are treated as if they don't struggle with like porn addictions or whatever that may be, just like lust in general. Hearing that come from like a pagan perspective is just like so interesting because it's like if we have this problem in the pagan sense, I can only imagine how horrible and shameful it is to have that problem in the Christian community.
Well, because Christians censor themselves all day long, and it's funny because as Christians a lot of times we hold to conservative views when we're all talking about free speech and doing, speaking the truth and all these things, but yet in our own community we censor ourselves more than anyone can ever censor us. When it comes to talking about these types of issues, no one's gonna go out onto the floor and say, oh yeah, like when a guy takes his shirt off, I struggle with looking at him or lusting after him or whatever. No one's gonna say that because that's not socially acceptable in the Christian circle. So it's very damaging on both ends because one, you have women that are struggling with these things that we're talking about and they aren't coming forward and confessing it or getting help with it, which means they're having to fight it on their own. And anyone who knows anything about sexual sin, fighting it on your own does absolutely nothing for you. You will not beat it by yourself. And then on the flip side, you have the men who are being told that women do not struggle. So now when we're reinforcing this idea that women do not struggle with lust, we're just promoting these guys to go out and do all the things that you
But
named.
do they believe it? That's my question.
Do they believe it? I think functionally.
Because if they're getting ripped for the girls, they got to know that they're looking, right?
On an actual level of, common sense, no. But functionally, it's a great, easy way to absolve yourself of the responsibility of modesty, which is what happens. Because you tell the guy, oh, I don't struggle. The guy knows what you're attracted to because he can go to the movies with you and watch how you react to Chris Evans. So obviously there's something there. He knows that on an instinctual level. He functionally lives that out. And now you have no one helping anyone because the guy's getting ripped for summer. The girl's saying she doesn't care about the guy getting ripped for summer. And that cycle just continues. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I saw this video on YouTube, and shout out to Sinner to Saint Pops for helping us with this episode, because he's going to be helping us with some videos. But I found this one video, and I'm going to play a little clip from it that kind of just highlights on a whole the willful ignorance to this topic that is just ultra damaging. So it's this podcast, and the host has this lady on, and she's going to give her opinion on what men's modesty looks like. So I'll have him roll that clip, and we'll just talk about our thoughts after.
What does male modesty look like to a woman? And, in terms of clothing and anything else, what does that look like from a woman's perspective, male modesty?
Yeah, Jason, I love your talks on male modesty. I remember listening to you so many times, being on the road with you talking, and you would always give the example really quick of that. How would you phrase it? It was something about the male shin. Do you remember this?
Just that how girls don't get distracted looking at guys' kneecaps or legs in class or all the hairy legs.
I have used that example so many times over the years. It's one of my favorites. I don't know, but for me, I would die laughing. I'd be cracking up in your presentation. That's so funny because it's so true. But there is modesty obviously involved with men too, because again, it's a virtue. So it's a virtue. We're humans. We were made to practice these virtues. We are drawn naturally to virtue.
Okay, we'll pause it there real quick. That in and of itself is not true. Left to our own, we are not going to value virtue, especially the virtue of modesty, because that goes against the complete center of our sinful nature, which is to draw attention to ourselves and to want to gain validation from other people. Mm-hmm. So that in and of itself is a dangerous starting point to think about modesty from. It's like, oh, naturally I want to be modest. That's not true. Yeah. It's the complete opposite. And that's why this topic is so hard for people to discuss, is because no one wants to come out and say, yeah, when I do go out of the house, sometimes I do want to get attention from people. Because now you're seen as vain. You're seen as, some haughty person who just wants to all this attention. And if we're being honest, we've all struggled with that at one point or another. So to come from that vantage point of, oh, we all value this virtue, that's not true. So we have to be very careful with the credit that we give ourselves as sinful beings, that we're just so great internally that we would value these things. Mm-hmm. But we'll continue to roll it.
Even though it's hard. And so for men, ways that you can practice virtue, let's just talk about your dress. So there's a time and a place for all types of fashion, right? Your t-shirt and your jeans are great. Please keep them over your butt. Just wear the jeans over your butt. Can you just wear jeans the normal way? Can you wear pants the normal way? It's just stop. So I would say that.
Yeah,
let's just say it.
Occasion of sin for women. It's just
no, but that's just that.
Yeah. See, and we'll stop the clip there, but I don't know if you guys heard that, but it's extremely important because even the guy is reinforcing this for this lady by saying, oh, when the guy has his butt out, basically, the girl's not sinning by looking. She just doesn't want to see it.
Which is so funny because he just asked her thoughts on male modesty. And as she's telling him, he decides to tell her, you girls don't struggle with that as she's talking. It's like, oh, wow, thank you for letting us know.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
That's what I'm saying. Functionally, we do not operate as if what they're saying is true.
Yeah.
Because if that was true, he wouldn't have to clarify that. Yeah. The need to say, oh, it's not because you're sinning, right?
he makes it sound as if like if a girl was to stumble over that'd be like complete like lunacy. Like not that a girl would ever do that, because that'd be offensive to ever think a girl would ever look at a guy's butt. Like
if
what?
that is the case, then why are we covering it anyway? If the girl's not gonna sin, what is the point of wearing pants? She makes that whole point of like,
just walk out in your underwear.
Wear
then.
your pants normally. Why? Why would I do that if you clearly
She's
don't
basically
care?
saying that it has nothing to do with modesty. It's just like, it's not a vibe, was basically what I just got from that. It's just not a vibe.
It's gross. We don't want anything to do with it. Just wear your pants. Like, it's just such a cavalier and prideful, honestly, at the core. It's a very prideful heart state to say, it's to voice these things as if you're just above the rest, just shoulders above us all. Oh, we don't care. We don't struggle with that. That's crazy talk. And I think it's just so damaging, especially for young girls and young guys, to be listening to that or seeing that and think, oh, they don't struggle.
They just think it's dumb.
Yeah, they just think it's dumb.
Which we do, by the way, think that sagging is dumb. But there's also a whole nother penny to it.
Right. Like, of course, sagging and showing your underwear, like, really? Like, come on, bro. Come on, bro. But at the same time, it's like, it's the realities are still there. And I think with modesty, and honestly, just in the Christian culture as a whole, a lot of times we live in the what should, because we know what should. And we like to idealize the what should of, oh yeah, I shouldn't be lusting after that, or I shouldn't care about this, or I shouldn't even be looking at that. But then we forget about the reality of what is. And the fact that regardless is if you think you should be lusting, if a guy is sagging or not wearing his pants correctly or whatever it may be, the reality is you will. Instinctively, in your nature, in your design, you will. So to sit here and pretend like you won't, and that you're just designed to not.
Well, here's
crazy.
like the example I always use is when you have sex, what happens? Everyone takes off clothing, correct? So if people start taking off clothing in public places, like your pants or your shirt or whatever that may be, and those are things that are used as attraction in the bedroom, is it really that shocking that someone stumbled over that while you were doing that in public?
Yeah.
Like, what is the difference?
It's funny because we often take the scenario approach, and that's why I said before, for men's modesty, everything is scenario appropriate, where it's like, well, if you're here, it doesn't matter, but if you're here, it definitely matters. So we have to have some congruency and some consistency in our thought process, or else we end up with thoughts like this, and it's just...
Well, that's the funniest part, too, is because women get no leeway for that. It is not really based on occasion. It's always... Yeah, unless you're at the beach. But even with that, like, there is more pressure for like, girls know in their minds that, like, bikinis are seen as, like, not appropriate by a lot of people.
Yes.
Whereas men, a lot of men have no idea that we would say, yeah, you should put a shirt on.
Well, I agree, but I also disagree. I think in their minds, they know the reason they want to take their shirt off.
Yeah.
Do they understand the totality of the effect that they're actually having? That I think
there's no
is
pressure to do that. They would never think, oh yeah, these people want me to put a shirt on.
It's basically a win-win, right, for guys? Because if the guy goes, he knows why he wants to take his shirt off. So if he takes his shirt off and he gets no backlash, he wins. If he takes his shirt off and he gets the reaction that he wants from the female, he also wins. So there's basically no one's looking at him and saying, oh, you're in the wrong. It's only win-win.
Yeah. Well, it's just so interesting too. Like, it's just so crazy to me because, like, when you talk about this, like, if you, like, even when they're making the rules at camp or whatever, it's just like, it would be way too much to, like, ask the guys to wear a shirt in the pool. Like, that's just, like, way too much. You know what I mean? But then girl shows up and her bra straps out and they're like, oh my gosh, you need to leave the camp. Like, you are, like, causing everyone to stumble. Like, it's this whole thing. There's no grace for that. So it's like, they think that, like, men can't put like any effort. It's just too much work. But like us girls, man, we better be covered from head to toe at camp, or else like you're out. You're gone.
And again, that falls back to the lies of men are visual, blah, blah, and women, they're, you know, I heard this phrase the other day. Men, this is a quote. I can't remember who says the quote. I'll have to find it. I'll put the link in the description. But it says, men fall in love with what they see. Women fall in love with what they hear.
So I guess then that women don't care about being attracted to the person they're with,
No.
if that's
Well,
the case.
well, why do you think there's so many people who give people the advice when the guy asks a girl out and she's not attracted to him, and they say, just go anyway, you might be attracted later. It's like, no, you won't. If you're not attracted to him and you think he's ugly or you think he's unattractive, why would you entertain it? You want to have desire for the person. And I think that's why a lot of this like sex on demand stuff and like all the issues that fall into like sex in marriages, I think a lot of it stems from this starting point of you actually desiring to be with that person. If you don't really want to be with that person or you're not attracted to them in any way, sex is probably going to be a lot less exciting for you because you could care. It would become a burden. So I think this advice is harmful to people, or it can be harmful. I'm not saying that if you marry someone and you're attracted to their personality or whatever, that your sex is going to be terrible or whatever. But I think it would drastically be different if people started from the posture of, I desire to be with this person. Right. That would change so much.
Well, it's just so confusing for girls to tell them like, yeah, you want to be attracted to the guy you're with. And then when they're attracted, and then the rest that comes with attraction, which often ends up being lust or whatever that may be, then it's like, why are you feeling that way? Like, you shouldn't feel that way. And then it's like, well, what's attraction again then? Like, I'm confused on like what we're supposed to be feeling right now. Like, it's just so like such a mixed message that we tell girls.
Yeah. And that's why you see all these relationships where people are in really, really long dating phases. Like, okay, so there's only two scenarios, really. There's the scenario where they're not really attracted to each other and it's extremely easy to abstain from sexual sin because you really don't desire them in any way, shape, or form. Or there's the other side where you're taking too long and you should hurry up because stuff's happening.
Well, that's the thing is for all the amount of stuff that is happening, the amount of people who end up having sex outside of marriage, right? It's like, how could you? So are we only thinking that the guy initiated that? Like when the chick ends up pregnant out of wedlock, are we like, well, it's because the guy was visual? Like,
well, that is a lot. And especially with all of this talk on abortion, Roe v. Wade and all this stuff, you're hearing a lot of these opinions where it's like, well, if guys just stopped having sex with women, and it's like, you realize outside of rape, the woman has to consent to sex, which means she wanted to have sex as well.
As if she couldn't initiate that even.
Yeah.
As if women seducing men never happens.
Oh, never.
Ever.
Never.
I mean, why? I mean, I don't even get me started on that.
Yeah, it's a whole rabbit trail and we can continue to go down. But I did have another video that I wanted to play. And before I play it, I just wanted to read a verse because, again, like I stated earlier, a lot of people would go to scripture and say that scripture never addresses men directly about modesty. And a lot of the verse that the main verse that they use is 1 Timothy 2:9. Likewise, also that women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair and gold pearls or costly attire. So there is that clear prescription to women on how to dress and, you know, to be decently dressed, respectfully dressed. Mm-hmm. And they use that to say, if men was a thing, or if modesty was a thing for men as well, there would be a prescription for men in scripture on things to not wear or how to dress modestly. Mm-hmm. And to that, I would just also go to Romans 14:13, which talks about not causing your brother or sister to stumble, which is really important. Mm-hmm. It says, therefore, let's not judge one another anymore, but rather determine this, not to put an obstacle or a stumbling block in a brother or sister's path. So there clearly is a sense in which men can cause women to stumble as well. Now that this verse obviously covers a lot of ground when it comes to not causing a brother or sister to stumble, but modesty and lust is a sin that both men and women share. So if we both share it, that means we can both invoke it or provoke it. Mm-hmm. So there has to be a sense in which men can provoke lust from women as women do from men. So there has to be both. Yeah. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that before.
Well, also I think that in the garden, when Adam and Eve were naked, when they found out they were naked, it wasn't just Eve who covered herself up, correct? Yeah. Like they both covered themselves up for a reason.
Yes.
Adam included, man. Adam included.
No, that's a great point. And it's not like it took them some time to figure it out. Like, oh shoot, like, oh man.
Do you really need to cover?
I wonder if Eve is struggling with the fact that I'm naked right now.
Yeah.
Or like, I wonder if she's thinking anything of it. It was instinctual. In 0.3 seconds, they were like, I'm naked. This is what it is. We cover ourselves. There's that shame of it. So there's that extreme correlation that people are refusing to acknowledge in this conversation that can be super damaging. But I did have another video that I wanted us to react to, and we'll kind of go through this one. It's this couple, and they're talking about their thoughts on men's modesty and just modesty talk as a whole. And I think they brought up some interesting points, some points that I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but we'll watch it and we'll kind of break it down as we go. So hopefully you guys enjoy this one. So we'll roll this one.
So immodesty is then presenting yourself as an object, as just body parts, as just maybe different items that I have put. These are more important than me as a subject, who I am as a person. And I think it takes on different forms in men, especially, whereas most advertising recognizes the beauty of the female body. So modesty takes on different forms in men. And I think it tends to be more about flaunting maybe wealth and our finances and strength. And
your parts, like your biceps, your abs.
So like if my Instagram is all about my wealth or all about my health, like these are different attributes that can become immodest if I am calling attention to these things, which are more important than me as a subject. So if we're calling attention to our wealth or our health more so in our social media, then the subject, me, like if it's all based on my finances and my strength, and that's obscuring who I am as a person, that can become immodest. That can become, again, a flaunting and more kind of like a peacock effect, which is on the one hand to try to make yourself attractive to other people, women, but also men. Funny enough, I think men do it also to kind of gain the admiration.
Okay, we'll pause right here. Okay, they said a lot there. I think going back to what he started with, which I think is true, universally, we recognize the attraction of the female body more. I think on the flip side, they tried to branch off this whole idea of flaunt, like a specific small minority of men that try to flaunt their body, like their biceps or their abs. Like only gym bros are capable of trying to flaunt their physical strength or their body in that way, which I think is extremely idealistic, but also not real.
Well, they just make it like, what I got out of that was there's really not much that we can say about men's modesty as far as like clothing and stuff goes, so we're just gonna make it like an attitude thing.
Yeah,
but I'm like, an attitude thing is also for women as well, and there's not more clothing issues for women than there is for men. Like
right.
There is just the same amount to talk about for both. So I feel like them jumping to, well, let's talk about their behavior, as if like, because there's not enough to talk about as far as how they dress and things.
Yeah, and I think there is some truth in the fact that the peacocking effect of men trying to flaunt wealth and status and those things is real.
Yeah. Women do that too, though.
They do. The value on men a lot of times in the world can be heavily based on the things you provide. Now, in a biblical sense, we are the providers, so there is that aspect of truth in that we should be able to provide and take care of the woman that we marry or are dating or whatever. Mm-hmm. At the same time, the emphasis has become so much on your monetary value that it becomes this effect of like having to show it and having to be validated for the things that you have achieved and have attained, and your car and your job and all these things. Now that's who you are. That's just your person. You're like, I am these things. And I think that is a good point that he made. But at the same time, like you said, they're trying to disassociate the physical part from the heart part, which you can't really do because they go hand in hand.
Right. And I don't know how I feel yet about if I feel like the human body is what did he say? The woman's body is appreciated more as beautiful. Is that what he was saying?
From the masses, yes.
I would say though that just watching movies, commercials, and all that stuff, they do just the same amount of stuff, or a lot of the same stuff with guys' bodies as well.
Well, I think because I would agree, but I think the standard for men's physical attractiveness is so much more rigid. And I think it's funny too, because a lot of times you hear women complain about unattainable body standards and beauty standards. For women, there are so many more, how should I say, categories of attractiveness.
Well, now there is.
From men, especially now. I mean, that you had that whole Sports
There's no body
Illustrated.
movement really for men.
There is no Sports Illustrated with a fat man in a Speedo, and they say, here's your new swimsuit. That doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That does exist for women. So I think there is a truth in that universally the female body is viewed as more attractive than the male body. However, if you are in that top 20% of men who have the stereotypical physical attractive body of a wide back, big shoulders, abs, big arms, if you have those things, then yes, you're equally on that same footing as all the women. The problem is majority of men are not at that point. Mm-hmm. So they don't view themselves as being able to cause someone to stumble because they don't look like Chris Evans. When in actuality, you don't have to look like Chris Evans in order to cause someone to stumble. That's not the whole point. So I think it's just a misrepresentation, because what he said is true. It's just misapplied. Mm-hmm. So we'll keep it rolling.
In respect of men, why do we exercise, or why do we accumulate and show off this wealth? It's for just trying to get value overall, trying to find affirmation, which again, ambition, success, not in itself a bad thing, but
that's who you are. That makes like who you are. Like, this is just a part of me, and it's like presenting yourself. A part of yourself is like, this is who I am. I am my money. I am my biceps.
Right.
I am my abs. Modesty is pointing to God. Immodesty is always pointing to ourselves, and it's always showing a part of ourselves.
Yeah. Who am I trying to glorify?
Yeah.
I think Peter Kraft talks about like vanity as the peacock showing off the feathers that it did not create. Am I always calling attention to me as the most important and the center of the universe, or am I giving glory to God and using all these good things for the aid of other people?
When it comes to modesty, how we present ourselves as objects, that's going to be different for men and women. How women present themselves, we use our bodies because we know our bodies are beautiful. And again, advertisers know that a woman's body is inherently beautiful.
There.
So
again, there is that reinforcement of women will use their bodies to get attention. Men do the same thing. And I think it's interesting that he brought up how men work out for other men and like how they get jobs and status for other men. That I can't think of a more misguided and misapplied sense of state for men. No guy is in the gym, and like it's even a meme, right? Like after getting into the gym, I just being inundated with memes about the gym. But there is always that meme of the guy goes to the gym thinking he's going to get a bunch of girls, but instead at the gym he just has a bunch of guys coming up to him saying, "Oh, you look big," or like, "You look jacked today." So that no guy is starting his path on the gym thinking, "Oh man, I need to get approval from other dudes."
I would say that's more of a girl thing. So I feel like that's like the flip scenario. Like, girls are more likely to be like, I want to look good and prove myself to other girls than guys are to do that for other guys.
Yeah, guys don't care about other guys. So this whole idea of like women will use their bodies to get the attention of men, and then men will use their finances and other things to get the attention of women. It's just not true, because the motive for why you want to look good. Now, obviously, from a Christian's perspective, we have 1 Corinthians 6:19 says, "Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God, and that you are not your own?" So in my personal conviction, I think being in shape and working out is something that we do unto the Lord because we are called to take care of our bodies that we've been given from the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, we have that ulterior motive of wanting to be desirable from the opposite sex, especially if you're single. So as a single guy, to hear this mindset of the female body is inherently beautiful and yours is not, does not help anybody do anything. That's nowhere in scripture do we see that the male body is not inherently attractive to the female. We never see that. Now, obviously, I think guys are way more accepting of, like I said before, different body types, different looks in women, where for men, it's typically more stereotypical of this ideal type, but that doesn't change anything. It doesn't really change anything on the big scale because, and you see this in dating a lot, and I think it's, as men, we need to really work on this because as men, we want to date a girl that we find attractive, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we don't value ourselves enough to even put in the effort to want to be desirable to women. Mm-hmm. So we have this standard of like, oh, we want women to look this way. But then with this type of mindset, we're being told that the male body is not attractive. So we don't try. Mm-hmm. We don't try to look attractive. And for the people that do, we vilify those people by saying, oh, you're trying too hard to look attractive. You're now immodest and you're vain and you're prideful because you want to be desirable to women. Now, there's that balance, right? Everything we do shouldn't be to be desirable and to be attractive to women. But how are you going to ask someone that your prospective spouse or, someone you're dating, I want you to look a certain way, but I'm not going to look that way either. Mm-hmm. How are you going to ask someone to do something that you're not willing to do yourself? So I think as men, we do have to put a value on being the best version of yourself. If you want to have this quote unquote, in her words, inherently attractive female body, you need to be able to bring something back to the table back. Mm-hmm. So I think this mindset is just a little bit, it's just concerning.
See, and that's like the same thing with modesty too, is these guys want a Proverbs 31 woman and these women who cover up. Meanwhile, they're posting their gym selfies and stuff. And it's like, fam, no, like you're asking for a modest woman, but you ain't doing nothing. Like you ain't doing nothing.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And again, that just stems from this whole idea of women don't care, which we know is not true.
Or women should just like avoid like looking at that stuff. Like I had someone like come on my Instagram and be like, oh, like women don't need to follow those gym accounts. Like they shouldn't, if they're stumbling over that, whatever, because to them, it's like, well, that's their career and they're doing this because they have to. Right. But I'm like, as a Christian, I don't give a crap what your job is. Like if you have to be half naked for it, man, get a new career. Like I'm sorry, there should be no reason why you have to tell anyone to avoid your page because of what you're posting.
Yeah, if you're like, this is a men's only page, guys, sorry.
Yeah.
You're doing something wrong,
okay,
man.
So I'm going to start posting my bikini pics so the girls can see how bikinis fit on my body. And if guys are struggling with that, like, they really just should ignore my page. Like, this is my job. Like, no, that would never fly with anybody.
No, it wouldn't. But it flies because we have this mentality of like, unless you're some rich guy pulling up in a, Corvette with, a million watches and you're just like, you have all this wealth and stuff to flaunt, that's your heart being immodest. Mm-hmm. But if you pull up without a shirt to the beach and you're just chilling, kicking it in your Speedo, no one cares. We don't care. No one cares. The women don't care, clearly. As long as you wear your pants right, we don't care.
I mean, I just think also, like, kind of just, like, bringing up career choices and stuff. Like, Christians there is no excuse because you chose that you wanted to do this job and it just so happens that you have to dress this way or whatever. Like, those are sacrifices you have to make sometimes as a Christian. Like, I remember doing dance and I knew from the beginning of when I started, you're never going to get to where you're performing at the, for celebrities or whatever that is, because you're never going to dress like that on a stage. You're just not going to do that. So therefore, that career choice is not an option. And so I think people just end up making a lot of excuses for themselves of why it's okay to dress this way. And well, the guys in their Speedos who are swimming or whatever for sport and stuff, it's like, yeah, that's all great and stuff, but like, can you really say for a fact that like it's really just okay to wear a Speedo like that just because you're swimming?
Right. That's such a good point. And I think a lot of times the way that we work as human beings in our sinful nature is we ask the question of how close to the line can I be before it becomes an issue for everybody else where it now is affecting me. Mm-hmm. So like for guys, I think they'll start, okay, we can do the shirtless beach pic, or we can do shirtless gym mirror photo. And they keep getting closer and closer to, being more immodest and more immodest, until someone says something like, okay, that's too far. Now I got to dial it back a little bit. But it's always
just
that
a
question.
Little bit, though.
Yeah, it's always that question of how much can I show? And I think that's, again, with the whole modesty thing for men and women, because I hear it all the time with women. I get this question like, okay, so what can I wear? It's like, okay, so how close to the line do you want to be? You know what I mean? Like, we should be trying to stay as far away from the line as possible. Not saying you dress in a potato sack, but we shouldn't be wanting to be to the edge of like, well, it's borderline immodest, kind of immodest, but I'm within the means. Like, we don't want to be there. So that line of questioning is inappropriate and immodest in and of itself of how much can I show? Like, that's not the question we want to ask. The question we want to ask is, in my dress, how can I direct that back to Christ?
Right.
And he mentioned that before, and they kind of veered off again by going back onto the male body is not attractive bit, but they are right in that sense of what we do should be pointing back to Christ.
Right.
And if we're asking the question of what can I show or how close to the line can I get, we're not asking that question. We're not asking the right question. So we'll let this ride out. I think there's only a couple more points I had to make on this one.
So we know we can manipulate. And guys, again, we just said that like how guys present themselves immodestly is different. So it seems like we're always harping, especially on women when it comes to modesty. But that leads us to point number 3, is that modesty, it says this in the Catechism, let's see, paragraph 2524 in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, that modesty is an awakening of yourself and of others as a subject and not as objects. So, men, our point number 3 is that men, you can never blame a woman for what's going on in your heart, because the goal of your heart is to see her as a subject, as a human person, not as an object for lust, but as a person to be loved.
Christ calls attention to the heart, and that if you even look at a woman with lust in your heart, you have committed adultery. So it does not matter what a woman is wearing. Guys, she is not responsible for the sin of your heart, for the lust of your own heart.
She could be completely naked, and the goal of you as a Christian man is to see her as a person to be loved. I mean, that's the truth.
To see the subject, to not just see body parts. And now that is the goal. Now, starting out the gate, if you need to, again, the power of a woman's beauty, if you need to look away because in your heart you're starting to lust, you look away, but that's not the end. It's not a puritanical no to the beauty of the body
and you
for
don't
life.
Place yourself in times, you don't we don't place ourselves in temptation. So if you are struggling with this, you obviously, there are shows that you should not be watching, that if they're causing you to stumble, if they're drawing out this lust in your heart, avoid those shows. The first step is, yes, avert the eyes, but the goal should be, if you don't ever go beyond that, that's not good. The goal should be that your heart is changed and purified by God's grace, by His mercy, and that you're able to look at a woman, no matter what she is wearing, and see the beauty as God created her as His daughter.
That's a great point. We'll get to that next. So much right there that they said that is kind of, and again, they said obviously they are Catholic, so there are some different views there that they do hold.
Right.
But on the just on the onset, this whole idea of this, I don't even know how to phrase this. This whole idea of like the responsibility part. Obviously, this is true. If the woman comes out and she's dressing immodest, it's the guy's responsibility to not lust, right? This is true. But why is that not addressed for the men? Why? I don't get it. Why is it not? So are the men responsible for making women lust, or do they just not lust ever? Because like this whole, it's just weird how you can go so far in one extreme. Like, even if she's naked, they said, the goal of you is to look at her and see the beauty and love, see her as a soul to be loved, which...
You know what I think this has to do with as well is I think because women, honestly, like I was going to say this earlier too, because I knew this was going to get brought up. Someone was going to say something dumb and I was just going to have to say it. But like, just because men don't have boobs, I feel like they get treated completely different. You know what I'm saying? Because there's less privates per se, means that like, they equate that with like, okay, well, for the woman then there's so much more to see. So if she's completely naked, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that was like, that's where that thinking stems from, which is just sad. And like, I've heard that argument so many times where like, women have boobs, like men don't have that. So it's not the same.
Here's the thing. And this is what's really sad is we've numbed the female to the male body. We've numbed them. So when we come out and when we go watch Marvel, which is usually viewed as a typically like safe thing to watch. There's nothing really in it. Even though there's plenty of shirtless dudes in it, it's viewed as safe. It's a okay thing to watch. And if the reverse is true and there was a bunch of women, even if they were just in a bra, it would be like, we can't watch this. That's too much inappropriate.
Yeah.
So there's this insanity of numbing the female to even the desire of, because that's how this works. And that's why porn is so damaging. Because if you keep seeing something, you're going to numb yourself to the stimulus of that thing. And that's why it's so bad, because you have to go more and more and more to feel something. Mm-hmm. And it's the same now. So pretty much unless you see a man naked, there is no stimulus there, because we've numbed the female to the desirable aspects of the male body. Mm-hmm. And it's very sad.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
It's horrible.
All right, we'll let this finish out right here.
Yeah, I go to this gym and sometimes the little clothing girls are wearing, I see how other guys are watching her and staring at her like she's a piece of meat, and it breaks my heart. And, you know, I want to go up and say, like, you know, you're worth more than how you're dressing, or like,
but yeah,
kind of call her digging, but then
you,
then I would get punched and kicked out of the gym for life. And you know, the ironic thing of sometimes when we're trying and we want to protect our sisters, it can backfire very quickly.
Yes, yeah.
But again,
because
doesn't mean we.
Not everyone knows that it's coming out of a place of love. It's like, oh, you're judging me. But that's the thing is that desire to protect and to guard is a beautiful thing. But it's not always seen as a positive thing.
No, not in our culture and our way of life right now. But it means, again, as Christians, as Christian men, we see what's going on in our own hearts. We check ourselves first, and we begin to ask ourselves the hard questions. How am I being immodest? What am I showing off of myself, my health, finances, state in life, my wit, my whatever? Again, great things, but where am I calling undue attention?
All right, well, yeah, we'll stop it there. My last thought is what they just talked about of protecting the sister in Christ. Who's protecting the men? No one's coming alongside them to say, what you're doing is not helpful. Because we have this idea for women where, like, all they want to do is be valued on their looks, and it's just so sad because you're worth more. Like, that's the verbiage. You're worth more than the yoga pants and the sports bra that you wore to the gym today. You're worth more than that. Is the dude not worth more than the shirtless pic that he just took? Is he not worth more than that?
And also, can you really even talk about helping a sister out? Put on some dang clothes. That'll help a sister out.
The
That's
shirtless guy
protecting a
coming
sister.
over to the girl in the yoga pants and sports bra saying, "You're worth more than that." The irony there is just mind-numbing.
Like,
It's
how could you
crazy.
even talk about helping a sister without addressing that? Like, the whole point of the video was to talk about men's modesty, was it
Yeah.
not? And then you're talking about helping a sister out by telling her she's immodest?
But this is the problem with society, and this is why conversations can never move forward. Because when you start talking about one thing, right? We want to talk about men's modesty, but the other side always gets brought in. It's like, okay, even if someone is doing this on the other side, what about this topic that we brought up? Can we stay on this? And
Yep.
it's so hard to do that because everyone's trying to move the goalpost and reassign blame and reassign the responsibility. It's like, no, can we just take responsibility for each of our individual parts? Men have a part to play in modesty. Women have a part to play in modesty. Men lust. Women lust.
Yeah.
Why can't it just be like multiple things can be true at once? And we're so bad in this generation at seeing that. It's terrible.
It's awful. And I just think, like, men just have no accountability at this point. And the women have no accountability for stumbling over the men that don't have accountability for dressing half naked.
And
So
that
there's just
cycle
no
rinses
accountability.
and repeats. And if you don't address it when you're young, it's going to be so much more difficult to address later. And like you had brought up, like summer camps, like all these things where all these women are being taught, like, you better cover up, or like, you got to be, don't let your brothers in Christ stumble. And the men are being taught, don't look.
Yeah. Don't look at her bra
them.
strap.
Yeah, don't look at them.
Don't do
And
that.
It's like, what are we really achieving? And that is a good point that they brought up. Like, if the main objective for you is just to look away, you're not doing enough. That's not enough. That's a band-aid over the actual issue itself. We need to address the heart issues and the issues that we're not addressing, like the lust that women experience and the immodesty that men are advocating for. So there just has to be more honesty in this conversation for us to move the dial in any which direction.
Right.
Because there's so much stuff that's said that's completely unhelpful and not really applied in any way.
And women are just, I think these days especially, so turned off to even talking about modesty, because just like the way it comes off from the men is as if like, this is just a woman problem. Like, you really need to fix this for us. And it's like, how dare you? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's how a lot of people feel, It's like, okay, so this is all about you then. Like, it just drives me bonkers, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But that ultimately is the heart flaw of the spiritual freedoms doctrine in and of itself. Is a lot of people take the spiritual freedoms and say, my freedom is to do what I want as long as I don't think I'm in sin. Instead of saying, my spiritual freedom is to serve those around me and to honor Christ.
Right.
And again, it goes back to that question of how far or how close to the line can I get with still being in my spiritual freedoms.
Right.
So we got to reorient our whole way of thinking about spiritual freedoms, about modesty, and about lust, because ultimately at the end of the day, that's one of the main drivers of this. Obviously with other things, you can be immodest in other heart attitudes, whether it be pride of jobs and things that they mentioned, where it manifests itself a little bit differently. But I think lust is one of the biggest drivers of the immodesty conversation as a whole. And if we can't address that on an honest biblical level, we're not going to get anywhere.
And lust isn't just struggling over someone showing too many private parts. That's not what it is. Like, there's so much more to that. Like, I think I gave the example beforehand. If a woman is super busty and she's wearing some really tiny top that looks way tinier because she's so busty, that's the equivalent of a guy who's ripped as heck and wearing a shirt that barely looks like
cut,
it's
like down to
it's like a string. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even like, it's not thick enough. You can see everything through a shirt. Like, that is literally the same thing. It has nothing to do with the fact that she has boobs and he doesn't. Lust can happen in any form of that sense. You know what I mean? Like, I just think people need to stop comparing it like that.
And they brought up the verse of adultery, right? Like, if you look at a woman with lust in your heart, you have committed adultery. Is that not the same for women?
Yeah.
Because in the topic of men's modesty, which is what we're trying to stay on, we keep going back and saying, well, if you look at a woman, what if you look at a man?
Yeah.
What if? Is that even a scenario in your mind? If you look at a man and be like, oh man, like I wish I could be with him. Or are you not committing adultery in your heart? Does that command only apply to men?
Right.
Like we have to really get down to the nuts and bolts and like define the terms of what we're talking about. Because again, lust is not just like you saw someone and you thought they were pretty. It's beyond that.
Right.
And we have to get to what's beyond that initial just instinctive, oh, I walked down the street and I saw someone that was attractive. It's that lingering, it's the thought, it's the desire. Like we have to get to all those aspects of it. And all of those aspects come from what we want and what we're showing and trying to get. Like when we walk out of the house, and it's like, I want to elicit this response. You know, you really have to check yourself.
Yep.
So those are our thoughts and aided by some YouTube videos. And we don't want to be like ragging on anyone's YouTube channels. We just want to give our thoughts and compare it to scripture and bring light to it. So if you guys have anything that you guys want us to react to on this front, definitely let us know. If you guys have any contrary opinions, let us know. We want to talk about it. We just want to open the door for conversation because, again, like we started, this conversation is so bottlenecked to one aspect of it. And there's so much more there that people are not talking about. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It's been fun. We're glad to be back, and we're hoping to upload more regularly. Life's crazy, but we will work around it. So thank you all bloomers for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you all on the next episode.